Today we're looking at another old camera. This is the Argus C3. I'd never heard of Argus before. This was a completely new research project that I wound up looking up. It was very interesting. They'd been around for a while, an American made. They were based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And they made the C3 in October of 1939. It was their third version of a camera that they'd made. They released it for $35, which, according to an online inflation calculator, is almost $800 today. So it was pricey. But it was one of the most popular American-made cameras, which was actually really cool. I had never heard of it. I've never seen one before. Totally new. Or maybe I have seen one before. More on that later. This was commonly referred to as the brick because of its size, weight, and shape. And yeah, that's the first thing I noticed when I picked it up out of the box was it's got some heft to it. It's really cool. We can look over here. We've got your shutter release on the top. This is your film counter. This is how many exposures you can make. I assume because this here is what they called the film catch, that it automatically goes up as you take exposures. That is my guess. I don't know for sure because I have not used any. Doesn't seem to be going up, but that might be because there's no film in it. I don't 100% know. Continuing along, we've got a cold shoe here, so you could put an accessory on top, something that we still use in modern cameras today. Unlike a lot of the other cameras at the time that have stumped me on how to get into them, this one you do not pull up on the winding knob. It's simply a catch here on the side that was really stuck the first time I tried it, and I've had trouble with it since. But pushing down a little bit on there and popping it open reveals the inside of the camera, which is a fairly standard place to put one roll of film, and then it would go over here. It's got this so that it would catch. I know film used to have little holes on it, so it would go through, and that would be what would wind the film over. Actually wonder if it goes the other way on this camera. A lot of the ones that I've seen go from left to right, but looking at it here, I actually wonder if it goes right to left, because you would be winding, and why would you wind? Well, no, you do have a winding knob here. Oh, you know what? I don't know how it works. I've never actually been able to use the film camera. We might get to that one day at some point, but it would take a certain amount of money. Now, another interesting thing I notice here, your tripod foot is over on this side. Why would you want it so unevenly balanced? Usually you get your hole for the tripod right in the middle of the camera so it stays balanced, but it is all the way off to the left-hand side, which is interesting. Anyway, coming around to the front of the camera, we have two knobs here. One is your shutter speed dial. Now, we were talking about which version this is, the C3 being the third version released by them. It's not the Colormatic, which was another one that came out around the same time. They made a bunch of variations and version upgrades over the years. This one just happened to be the one that I got. This one does have the colors on the shutter speed dial here, which is something that the Colormatic would have, but it is not a Colormatic from my understanding. And then we have the rangefinder here, which is a series of gears linked to the lens itself. So let's get a little closer here. As I turn it, everything turns. And it goes from one side to the other, which is pretty neat. I don't see too many mechanical functions like this on a camera. I like that. Now, that is a little cumbersome if I'm trying to pretend to take a picture and I'm using this top dial. It definitely works, but you can also just turn the lens, and that actually is a bit smoother. Speaking of the lens, it is an Argus 50mm f3.5, and I think this is broken. I don't think this is meant to be like your lens hood to come out, because it doesn't really come out all that far or anything, and there are screw holes where something is missing. So I think that this is just broken in that way, but made in the USA. It's got all the information on there. It is coated Sintar, which I guess is a lens material. Not one I'm familiar with, but really cool. That's all the physical aspects of the camera. Just a couple more things here on it. I found it really interesting. I've not had a camera before that had two separate windows. According to the manual, this one is the rangefinder window and this one is the viewfinder window. So two different ones for two different functions. I can kind of see out of the viewfinder, but the rangefinder is basically gummed up. There's something in there. I don't know if I need to take it apart or clean it better. I did do a thorough cleaning when I got it, but I can't see out of it at all. According to the manual, this is the shutter cocking lever. It just goes to there. That's it. So I'm guessing because it is fully manual, if that's all it takes, then that would release the shutter. I can't actually get the lens off of there. That is built into it from what I can tell. Maybe if I took a screw off, it would come off, but then you would wind it up. And that would be the function of the camera. Fully manual, no battery or anything that would come later on other cameras we've seen, but really, really cool. Just big, thick one here. A couple other interesting things I found while researching this camera. Famously used by Tony Vaccaro, an American photographer who used it during World War II and has an amazing full name. First of all, look up that guy. Look at some of the photography. It's incredible what he did with this camera. Second of all, his entire full name, which I will try to pronounce here and probably will get wrong, Michelantonio Celestino Onofrio Vaccaro. That's a name. As I mentioned, the C3 is the third camera released by Argus. I'm quoting directly off of Wikipedia here. Although the design is over 75 years old, many C3s are still in use. The cameras are inexpensive on the used market, and their simple construction makes them relatively easy to repair. So I have no doubt that whatever could be wrong with this camera, I could get it working again. And I am kind of working towards that. I'm hoping in the future, this and many other cameras that I have, I'll actually be able to get some of the film and develop it myself and actually run them through again. We might have follow-up videos for all the cameras showing the photos that I was able to take and what they looked like. It's kind of out of the scope of right now. I don't have a place to set up and use any. I don't have a dark room. And then one last thing to mention here that I found really cool while I was researching it. I mentioned that I'd never heard of Argus. I've never seen this camera. Not necessarily true. Because it was so popular and so easy to come by because it was inexpensive, it's been in a lot of other content mediums. For example, several movies that I've seen, like Harry Potter, to mention one. This is the camera, although I believe it had a flash and some other things to it, but the camera used by Colin, was that his name? I didn't write that part down. I just looked it up and saw Harry Potter. And I think I also saw, was it Sky Captain? That movie with Angelina Jolie? I think that's the camera that they use in it, where they go to another world and they see all this stuff that's exciting, and the camera was up there taking pictures on it. Apparently I'd seen it there, but even more recently, Fallout 76, video game that I've put plenty of time into. The camera that's in it, they call it the Pro Snap Deluxe. Go look it up. It's this. They gave it a different color. It's this camera. They must have had one. Somebody probably had one on a shelf, and their designers were like, we got to put an old camera in there. And they just took it, modeled it straight off of that, colored it differently. But it is an Argus C3, and it's really cool to see. Speaking of going on a shelf, that's where this one is headed for now. It's about to go on the shelf behind me, but next week we'll have another camera to look at from this collection that my dad got me. It's going to be great. It may go without saying, but looking at old cameras, learning about them, this is something that I like.